I guess we're gonna do this a little differently. Normally, I have like a little intro, and I just do it all in one take. So maybe we'll do that. Mollie, welcome to Partner Ops Partner.
Aaron, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining me. I feel like we've talked a lot, but I'm putting you on camera and recording you for posterity now, which is new for me to do to
Also
lots of people.
terrifying.
It is a little bit terrifying. I mean, not that you haven't done this before. So, listeners, for who don't know, who are not hip to the jive of the funky beat in the RevOps world and don't know who Mollie is, shame on you. You should know who Mollie is. Mollie is a RevOps leader. That's the best way to say it. If you go search her on YouTube, I'm going to put that link in there, just a generic search, so you can see some of her oldest and maybe best content from like, it's really fun. But then also, like, I think this month you're being recognized in the RevOps community over at Rev Room, which is like a new, I think, executive kind of round room for Rev Genius. Is that right?
Yep. So it's kind of Rev Genius's more senior network
Yep.
and community.
And they're leading the charge by saying, "Hey, you're the member of the month, member spotlight."
Yeah, first one. I don't know why they picked me, but hey, I'll
You were
take it.
there. They looked around the room. They
I was
found
there.
you.
I
They're
know.
like, her, she'll do. She'll do.
They know.
Uh,
They knew I'd do it.
yeah, they knew that you would do it. Well, I could go on for a while, listener, talking about the things that Mollie has done. She's amazing. I'm just going to let you look her up. I'm not going to go through the career stuff that you normally do because I want to talk to Mollie specifically. If you and Mollie, I don't know if you listen to this podcast or not. It's a rambling podcast. I'll say that for about a year now. It's just been me rambling to myself for 10 to 15 minutes. And this year, I'm trying something different. I'm trying to get perspectives of different people from within the organization on partner operations. Because one thing that I think about our space for partner ops is that it's really undefined. My boss recently asked me, "Hey, where do you want to be in 5 years?" And I told her, "It's like, it's a good question. There's not a roadmap for what I do
Right.
in terms of leadership, growth, and success. And one of the paths is to take partner ops and maybe do like what other ops leaders would do and try to move into like a rev ops leadership position. But as we've seen with marketing ops and stuff, that's a hard row to hoe. You've got to actually get the role established for a while first. You and I met because you were hiring for a partner ops role at Deel about a year ago.
Yep.
So tell me about Deel. Was that the first partner ops role? What was the motivation for hiring that role at that time? Like, what was the argument that finally got you on board with we need to have somebody on this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I joined Deel, we were just very much at the beginning of building out a revenue operations organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say we went from like 0 to 150 overnight in terms of like building out RevOps. And, one of the teams I was tasked with, so when I started, I was overseeing all of like process and systems, right? So really working to get their house in order, get all of the tech and tooling and how we do business, how we sell established. Then from there, I created essentially a new team called Pipeline Operations.
Okay.
So when we think about, what was pipeline operations, it wasn't sales operations, right? It was looking at marketing operations. It was looking at sales development. So
Mm-hmm.
like your prospecting, your SDR, BDR operations, then bringing in, partner and alliances. So when we looked at, what our routes to market are, how we were, generating not only just demand but revenue, what were our channels for that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you've got your inbound, your outbound, and kind of your near bound, I think, is the newest bound
Uh huh.
out there, and your channel and motions. And the partnership team was very established already at Deel, right? They had a really strong partner organization. It wasn't just the one guy running partnerships that you see in some companies, right?
Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
multiple channels for partner, not only referral, but tech, as well as like network, kind of everything there, but had no actual like operational support. And so that was a big impetus of like, it's not sales ops, right? Like partner ops isn't sales ops. Partner ops in my mind is this
Mm.
hybrid between marketing operations, SDR operations, product operations, and sales operations
Thank
together.
you. You should say that louder for people in the back because one of the common things is like, oh, we're gonna put partner ops on the RevOps team, and I tell people often like that's one place that it could live if they like
Yeah.
RevOps.
Yeah. And and I think that's like with and our CFO at my current company and I just had this conversation yesterday. She's like, "Hey, why doesn't marketing ops go to marketing?" And I'm like, "Well, it could, but like, should it?" Right? And I think so much of it is like what the company, a lot of it has to do with like company setup, company dynamic, the people, right? Like, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
pretty big advocate. Like, you shouldn't try to dismantle, like, if you have an operations function, like, don't try to like dismantle a piece of that out. Um, Try to, you should keep it all together
So
under like a
centralizing
solid
that.
operations leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, not only because I think there's, I'm going to call it separation between church and state, right? So
Yeah.
like what this helps to do is the operations people report through me, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're business partners then to their functional leaders, and that I think gives them an ability, at least in my experience, to be able to push back and feel like they have more say in the strategy versus the tactics. Like from what I've seen, when you're kind of nesting under the function, you tend to get a lot lost in the weeds. You don't feel like you have the same level of authority versus like when you're positioned as a business partner, you have more of that autonomy, authority, and then you
Yeah.
also have this like operational like support engine of a team that's not necessarily your functional team that you're also learning from. And back to your point of like, where do I grow career wise? Well, if you sit only in partnerships, like you're not
Yeah.
probably going to get that exposure. The other thing that I think about with operations, right? There's kind of the pillars of operations, and I know I'm talking a lot, so you said to ramble, and I'm going to ramble.
No, that's all we're doing. It's a
But there's
conversation. I don't want to. I want to say things, but I also don't want to interrupt you because I don't want to break your train
I'm
of
on I'm
thought.
on a I'm on a flow right now.
Yeah.
But you have the pillars of operations, right? So
Yeah.
you've got actual operations, you've got your tech and tooling, you've got your insights and analytics, and you have your enablement, right?
Okay.
And so you're generally resource wise not building out a centralized like, hey, this is my partner ops IT team or systems team, right?
Yeah.
That's a global function. Same thing with enablement, tends to be a little bit more of a global function. Analytics kind of 50-50 pending on the org and insights, but tends to be housed centrally, right? So when you think
Yeah.
about establishment of like a revenue operations team that works as a business partner, then they also have these resources that get properly prioritized and allocated and assigned, right? Like if I
Yeah.
was running a RevOps team and PartnerOps didn't report to me and they needed Salesforce support, like it's going to be a harder battle for them to like prioritize something in versus,
Big
selfishly the people who report to me and
big time.
have more
I've
skin in the game for my success.
Yeah, so I'm taking notes. So just for you to orient, I've got you in front of me, and I've got notes for a call from other stuff you've done here. But I love the ops pillars concept because I don't come from a traditional op background. I think you know that. And I think we both actually started in insurance, which I think is interesting. I was in database analytics and the risk management, and I saw in one of your things you started in like sales ops in health insurance at Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yep.
Um, and so when I think about operations for me, it's been a natural growth and it's an extension of like all the other work that I've done in database analytics, managing support and looking at those issues, managing it within customer success. And so I come into ops with like a background in political science educationally, a background in communication with a master's degree. All my experience is hands in the field learning through the SaaS things. So when you talk about ops and pillars, it immediately makes sense to me that you've grouped it this way because I see those groups and I've worked in that fractured environment where like, okay, great, ops is buried within the organization. And one of the headaches is I have to go find like, great, who does this for your team and who makes the
Yeah.
decisions? And you're right. If we're trying to consolidate and group around ops, and you've already said the thing that I really wanted you to say is around like, well, partner ops is more than sales ops. It's all these things. We could just end the show there, and I would circulate that clip for everybody to pay attention to because I think that's critical. But I love that. So does that mean also from like a RevOps perspective, is the RevOps rolling up through operations in your mind in that model? Because I know that there's still this debate, like what is RevOps? Where is it at? We're seeing more adoption, but I still know people that don't seem to fully understand what it is.
Yeah.
I don't have a great understanding. So
Yeah, so and twofold. I dropped in chat, and you can feel free to link this with this. I have a shared RevOps roadmap that's just public in my Google site, so it's
okay.
got the pillars on there and like a good baseline in there. And like
There.
I hear and I'll just read verbatim like how I define RevOps, right? So it's the team focused on the enablement, so the people, process, data, technology, and the unification of sales, marketing, customer success, partnerships, business development, finance, product operation across the customer lifecycle. I know that's like a lot of words right there, but then like what the purpose is, it's the goal of RevOps in my mind. It's delivering visibility across the organization to improve efficiency in the revenue process,
Mm-hmm.
drive predictability, and create a more consistent customer experience, right? What I think about it is like, how am I streamlining, being more efficient, and improving predictability?
Love
And
it.
at the point that I can do those things, I should be creating a good experience, right? Like
Yeah.
whether it sits, so I've had this conversation with people before. And it's
Can't
like, where
imagine.
have I reported as a RevOps leader? So I've ran RevOps at several companies. I've reported to a CRO, right? Like that's like the common one, right? Like you're, part of go to
Yep.
market. CRO tends to lead go to market. I
Yep.
reported to the head of engineering and product at an organization.
Okay.
That one was a little. That was the one was a little interesting, but I think
Yeah.
it was more. It was more about the person than it was about the function, right? And the
Okay.
leadership that that
Yeah.
person provided. I've reported into CEOs at big and small organizations, and I've reported into like a head of commercial or a head of go to market. I'm trying to think. I feel like I've also reported into another. Those are probably the engineering one was I've reported into a head of product as well. So I've had about 5 different reporting lines.
Yep.
I
I
think,
have to.
you know, my if I said like where would I prefer to report, I think there's value in reporting into the CEO at the right type of company. There's also a risk of reporting into the CEO at the wrong type of company.
I can see that.
Um,
Depends on your CEO,
yep,
right? You
and
care a lot about leadership, by the way. For those who don't know Mollie, if you get into her interviews or chats, one of the things I know that you care about is people, and you care about people leadership, style of leadership, transparency. I think that's why we connected. Actually, I was thinking about like why, because we talked through this. I think we got connected because you had an open role, and I wasn't quite searching at the time,
yep,
and you ended up hiring a phenomenal person anyway. He's another friend of mine too, and he's a friend of the pod or friend of the whatever they call him. I'm going to drag Jason on here eventually. But like we chatted through that, but we just kept talking, and I was thinking, like, why did we just keep talking? Like, what about Mollie had me continually go back to her and ask questions? And one is, I feel like you're generous with your time. Two is your values around technology, the way you phrase and think about all of this, very much aligns with kind of where I'm at. And I'm looking at you. You're, I'd say, from like a career track perspective, folks. I got air quotes going here because what is a career track, right? At this day and the age, when companies can cut you left and right. But from a career track, you're kind of ahead up into you've hit that director level, that VP level, doing the C-suite kind of fun stuff. So when I look at you from there, and you're talking about the value of people and like the people you report into, I think that's critical from a partner operations perspective. I can't say that I've ever felt like I have real authority or ownership over the space that I'm in coming into a company right off the bat, or even after 6 to 12 months, because I'm always trying to convince people about what I do. Here's why it's important.
why it
Yes, you should have included
matters.
me in that conversation around partner process and operations, even though you're in product or marketing, around partner experience. And where I'm at Samsara, I'll say I've got a better, right, my full-time gig right now, I do have a better roadmap for that. I own the technical roadmap for all the projects that come through the programs team, but I'm still on a programs team. It's part of why I took the role. It's not RevOps. It's not ops. It's in
No,
programs. Well, that's
programs.
strange. Let's try this
Still
out for
very much
once.
ops. Yeah, still very much an ops function, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're still doing ops. It's just, it's again, it's, every organization is a little different. And I think, one of the things I'm going to go back to, like, why we keep talking is like, I recognize that you understand a whole lot more about partner and partner operations and that like that ecosystem than I do. So I've kind of lynched a little bit to you and said, like, I want to learn from people, right? That's one thing that I think anyone who's looking to like grow in their career is like, find people who are smarter than you at things that that you're not, the smartest in the room on. There's a lot that I'm not the smartest in the room on, and go learn from them. Right. So like
Yeah.
those are why I appreciate our conversations, because I've learned a ton from you in a place that I, likely coming in and running revenue operations, I'm not going to have direct experience in partnerships, right? Like in partner ops. Like that's not something like my background's marketing operations. I started in
Yeah.
sales operations, but the core of where I spent my time was really in marketing operations. So like, yeah, I'm not going to wake up and be the expert in partner ops at where I'm at in my career without going and learning from the people who are the expert in it and have spent the time and like really understand it and listen and learn from them. I did run, a partnership function at Funnelwise for a little bit, but that's very, very different than kind of where we're at today. And that was, 7 years ago. And like the partner space has completely evolved. So
Yeah.
I think the challenge that you're having today, I'm like, how do I, you know, I'm like, I was going to quote Mean Girls, but then I was like, I'm going to not get it right. But it's like, how do I make partner ops fetch, right? How do you make, it's not a thing, Regina. Like how do you make it a thing? Like you're kind of in the same situation that I think RevOps is still in, right? Like what does it mean? How does it
Yeah.
excuse me, get defined in an organization, and like how do you show people like, when should they include you, right? Like what does it
It's your journey in marketing ops. So the thing that I get told the most when I look at partner ops from like a comparative development, like people have said when I talk to them about where the industry type stuff, their response is, "Oh, you're kind of where marketing ops was 5 to 6 years, 5 7 years ago.
yeah,
Like it's a thing. Some people do it, but we don't know what to call it or how it works." And so I
it's
think it's
really just somebody
early.
sending emails versus like the
Exactly.
people
Like
really like taking the data and like building out the strategy.
yeah, and I think to me that's interesting because I try to highlight like no, I know people that have been doing this for 20 years, but their experience is deeply, deeply rooted in channel
Yep.
operations, and then we have to redefine what the word channel means because you mentioned earlier like partnerships has lots of channels, and some people could be offended by that because they'll say no, no, we're not channel partnerships, we're tech partnerships, or we're agency, and
Hmm.
I'm like yeah, yeah, but a channel is a method
Or
to
we're
market, right?
strategic. Like,
Exactly.
I
Like
mean,
so
like,
we're nitpicking like partner types, but we're not as concerned about programs. So okay, I'm gonna service a little bit. Back to the original question. At Deel, you looked and saw the partner team, right? You saw, okay, well, there's a partner team. It's being ran pretty
yeah,
well and they're growing, but they don't have direct operational support. Was it just your
they weren't being
observation?
supported, right?
Yeah. So that
Like,
was that it. You just
um,
saw that and you were like, well, we got to fill that hole.
well, and so like at that point in time, right, there wasn't marketing ops, there wasn't SDR ops, like there wasn't partner ops, there technically wasn't sales ops, right? Like,
Okay.
and at that point, Deal was, and it still continues to be a great growing organization, but it was like there's clear gap, right, as we
Yep.
build this out, and one of the things like I appreciate the most about that organization is they made the investment, right, and like I think at a lot of companies it would be arm twisting to
Yeah.
say like let's hire 20 some operations people
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, but when you can actually like build the case around the value, and like it's like why wouldn't marketing ops and sales ops just take over partnership? It's like yeah, they could, right, but like what's the value and dedication there, and how much faster can you move?
Yeah.
So when you're already splitting time and context in your own function and then adding an additional function on top of that, you're going to move slower, right? And finding somebody who really understands and can come in and build out the operations function, right? Like when you're hiring good people who know what they're doing, like
Mm-hmm.
it's worth its weight in gold for them to come in and make me look good, right? As your
Yeah.
pipeline operations leader.
Well, you've mentioned so in one of your past, and so I was listening to an interview you did like a year ago, and you had so many really good quotes in it, and I wanted to pull a couple of them up and make sure we talk about those too. I know
Is
you're
this
like, "Ah, what are you talking
don't
about?"
listen to my
I
stuff.
know I have to do my research. I want to be good at what I do, and I have to do my research. You said several things. I'm just going to highlight several things that I heard you say in this one interview that I love. It's less about what works or doesn't work, and more about the level of maturity. It's okay to fail, that realization, which I think that's a good career one. So like if we blended, because on the a part of what I do with this particular brand is also the job board and trying to help people like
Yep.
it's okay to fail. I didn't realize that early in my career. I thought I had to be right all the time. So I was very trepidatious, very cautious. I didn't take a lot of risks. And when I started taking risks and opening that door, things move faster. You said reason with logic, not emotion. Ask the obvious question. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in a room and I've got this obvious question, but it's hard to ask because everyone's talking like maybe it's been answered, but you don't see the answer. And if you're not sitting, especially for like partner ops, I'm a tangent operational team. So they don't bring me in necessarily to ask the blow up question that's going to send the project sideways. But if I see it, learning how to do that, that's a skill set, I think. I think it's not as easy as it sounds. Can you talk about that?
I was like, I think my favorite obvious question is like, what are we trying to accomplish here, right? Like, if I think that's the like, let's get back on track. But like, apparently, like that's the like soft phrase of like, you
Hmm,
guys aren't
I
all
like it.
aligned, and we're all sitting in different meetings right now. And so like a lot of times that's the one that I use in terms of like, how do I get everyone like on the same page? You get in a meeting, everyone's kind of talking about different things, like you're collectively brainstorming but not thinking about outcomes. It's like, all right, what are we really trying to accomplish here, right? What does
Yeah.
success look like? And like write that down somewhere, whether it's in like the chat, whether it's like on
I love
whatever
it.
the notes document is, but like put it at the top so like you can keep going back to it. I'd say like a lot of times it's hard for people to say that at the start of some conversations and meetings, but like it's like you've got to define it before you keep going. So I think that's, that's the obvious question. It's, if you see something, say something. I think it's like the airport, right?
Yeah.
You see the bag. So, it's like and I've talked about this. I think one of the best CEOs that I worked for was at Granular, right? A man named Sid, didn't really have a good or long standing relationship with him. He left pretty soon after I started because of the acquisition that happened. But like within my, you know, second or third week there, he, nothing like joining a company and them being like, hey, come meet, the CEO wants to talk to you. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, okay, like, cool. And he's like, what do you see? Right? Like, what are the three things that you see that we're not doing well?
Mm.
Right. And I'm like, okay, smart guy, because he understands that based on my role, I now have probably the best visibility into like what's not happening
Yeah.
or what should be happening. Right. Like, one of the things I was like, well, you have, tripled tech stack, right? Like, well, let's look at your spend and your
Ooh,
inefficiency
tech
there. Like,
stack.
you don't have like an actual like centralized data model of like customer management. You're running, these brands in silos, which is, hurting your ability to cross sell, upsell, right? You've got
Yep.
multiple go to market teams when you should have one.
That leads into another
Like,
quote you said. I don't interrupt you on that thought, but another thing you said that
yeah,
I pulled that big on this call was that technology is never the solution on its own. It's only as good as the process it supports and the people who execute it.
yeah. I mean, and that's like, tech is not a solution, right?
It's
Like,
not. Thank
again,
you. Again, louder in the back. This is going to be great. I'm going to have all these clips that I'm just going to share.
and it's the same thing with data where people are like, yeah, our data sucks. It's like, no, your data doesn't suck. Your process sucks. Like, data
Mm-hmm.
is a byproduct of process. And like technology is a way of moving and supporting the creation of data to support your process, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like go back to your process. And it's like if you don't actually understand like what you're doing and why and how you're doing it, like, and one of the things like I try to coach my team on is like, don't go build a dashboard, don't go try to like build this analytics stuff. Like, sit down and like look at what you need to measure, right? And
Yeah.
how you need to measure it and why you need to measure it. And then work backwards on that and say like, what are the steps that produce that information and produce that data?
Yeah.
And that starts to be your process, right? And if your process can't produce the data and the information that you need, like, you don't have the right process in place,
Yeah.
right? And like understanding that becomes that flow chart. And like, one of the things I'm probably most grateful for in my career is when I was at Blue Cross Blue Shield, they let me go get my Six Sigma Green Belt certification, right? So like spending time in process, even though it was like very much manufacturing heavy, right?
So you
It's
got your Six Sigma, and you felt like that was valuable in terms of like education. I'll say like for me, product background has been infinitely valuable for
yeah,
operations management because I bring an agile scrum mindset. Whether the
yeah.
company's using those tools or not, I know how to write requirements. I utilize workflow,
You think
especially over
like
the
an
past
engineer,
couple of
you think
years.
like an engineer and a product person, right?
Yeah.
You think about feature design, right? And functionality design and like value
Uh-huh. And the tech
pieces
stack is
there,
holistic,
which is
right? Like I think you've maybe had that
mhm,
viewpoint too. Like you have a CRM, but if you have a CRM plus outreach plus this tool plus that tool, it needs to feel more like one experience for your users. It needs to
yeah.
be as seamless as it can be. But this is also why I push back real hard on like PRM adoption. Every company I know that says, "Oh, we need to get a PRM." Okay, why? Driven by deal reg. Well, and then I get in and find out your product team and your marketing team have different partner locator tools, and your sales team doesn't have the partnership team can't even use the CRM
Well,
because
it's
it's
like,
not
do you even have a strategy around deal registration,
a
right?
hundred.
Like,
No,
or
we
is
just
deal
need it.
registration where a deal just goes to die? And
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like this mechanism, and it's like, okay, great. Like, how valuable is it? And there are great tools out there, right? And like,
Sure.
I think they're great at, but you've got to have the strategy and the process of this. And I think, it's, and a lot of these like partner organizations are like, yeah, partner, double down on partner, grow our business faster with partner. But it's like, what does that actually mean, right? And like, the other thing is like, if it's going to work organically, like, do you invest in the tool in it, right?
Yeah.
Do you need it? Is it the right piece, or is it just going to slow you down too? Like, at what point does some of this like I think about like there's so many great like prospecting tools out there and sourcing tools out there and at what point does it become a distraction versus like a productivity
Yeah.
gain too?
Yeah. So I've looked at, I talk about this with people when I've kind of walked the line between sales and partner ops and channel ops, right? And then kind of eventually kind of understanding like it's all about supporting the sale and revenue growth, which means supporting the customer and supporting your reps, making it easy for them to do it, whether
Yep.
it's direct partnerships. But the top 10% of people, they do well regardless of the tech stack. They do well regardless of the requirements. They do well regardless of the sales methodology. So from an operations
I was like,
perspective,
your top salespeople are going to be the ones that aren't going to adopt your stuff because they're going to keep doing it their own way because they know it works.
exactly. So why are we pushing? That's my ongoing push right now is why are we pushing so hard to get all this technology? Why don't we just like let the top do what they do and then find out ways to trickle down their methods? Like start from there instead of let me drive technology. That's a whole nother thing. I want to tighten up on a couple things with you real quick. So if you've got a RevOps person, I've got at least one RevOps friend who's like, I think I need to hire partner ops, but I don't know yet. And I'm trying to help have that conversation and say, well, listen, I can tell you all the things I think partner ops would do. I think if you put them
Yeah.
in RevOps, there is a slice of work that is RevOps specific. My preference is not to work on RevOps. Honestly, I don't really enjoy like territory splitting and commission and payment
But that
management and deal
but that's
management.
not
But
rev ops, right? That's sales ops, right? So like
that's
that's
fair.
the
That's
thing that
fair,
you
right? But when you put partnerships in a RevOps, that's the stuff that people think they need to do so far in my experience.
yeah.
So how do you justify what are you looking at to say, great, it's time to hire a partner ops professional? One, do you think that should be earlier or later? Two, what kind of markers are you looking at to know that it's time to make that play?
Yeah, so I think, and this is one of like our hot takes and hot topics that we talk a lot about is like attribution, right? Like sourcing,
Hmm.
attribution, crediting. One of the big things is like if you've got to be able to measure the value that like partnerships, alliances, channel, whatever you want to call it, are bringing to the organization. So if you've now invested in a team, a partner team, and you can't directly give ROI off of that, like that's
Hmm.
probably I don't want to say like that's the time you should hire somebody new, right? But like if you do know that like it's working and there's value and you can't measure it, like that's a good time to think about like, okay, clearly we're doing something well. We don't know necessarily how well, but we should figure out what's working, what's not working,
Yeah,
like and build something to scale, right? So like at the point you're thinking about like scalability and partner and in channel, like that's when you probably want to think about operations, right? Because that's that person who should be really coming in and saying like, all right, let's establish the processes, let's actually start building, capacity model and like KPI models around this and like building that engine, with the CPO or the head of partnerships, to get that squared away, right? And then looking at, what are your various, again, whether if you have marketplace, right? How do they work with product? How do they
hmm,
make sure they're starting to get the data that they need to? How do they then align with channel marketing so that we've got the right campaigns, the right touch points back? Like how do they really own the partner experience, right? And it's not only like owning the partner experience the same way you would like own a customer experience. You've got to, and this is where it's like it's one of the tricky ones, right?
yeah,
Because you're not only accountable for the partner experience, you're accountable for the customer experience through your partners too.
exactly.
um and so there's this like very like it's just the spider web, right? There's this trickle down, there's the trickle up. I don't think things trickle up, but like you've got to pay attention to that. And then obviously quota compensation, like payment if you're doing reseller and like those types of things come into place, which are a little bit more of like the sales ops function, but like
Yeah,
really should be owned through partner ops and at least strategically driven via partner ops.
yeah, okay, I can see that. I think this is where, like, if I look at what I do, like, I'm more of a it being in a program role now. I'm really more of like a portfolio and project manager. So my technical background on systems is going to enable me, and already is enabling me to scope better, write requirements better, and then
Yep.
drive our change through to like the way it's organized. Right? There's like a sales ops team, there's a biz tech team which manage the systems. I think that goes back down to your ops pillars you talked about, right? So I'm really more like consolidating and helping drive programmatic change through the projects that I'm driving. I'll go through all the process for UAT development, but I am less hands-on daily operations. We have a couple of people that do that. Like they don't roll into me or anything like that. They're just kind of around on my
Yep.
team. I think that's that question. I think it's going to be an ongoing question of how do we organize partner operations? Because I see the role as a strategic role. At least that's what I like to do, right? I like to be early. I like to know everything we're going on and help shape. Hey, product, as you think about partners, here's the things you need to think about from a process and ops
Yep.
perspective. Now, please go handle that. Let me know how I can help. So I look at it as a very consultative role. The earlier I can get there, I think the more consultative it is in that space. And then over time, it maybe becomes its own function with its own team. Because to your point, partners have a partner experience. You use that word. That's a huge buzzword right now, but it doesn't have a lot of meaning either. Right. But I think three stakeholders: customers work with partners, internals work with partners, partners themselves. Those three different elements of partner
Yep.
experience. So the role I think could be huge. I don't think it's a C-level role. I'll say that there's a big push right now for partner people to get like, we need a chief partner officer. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm on board with that idea. I think too many chiefs
It
gets
depends.
confusing.
Yeah, it depends on your business model too, right? Like I think if you're like if that's your route to market,
Yeah.
right? And like that's then yeah, maybe you do have that and then you don't have like the CR, you know what I mean? Like I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Like, I'll try to keep these to a half hour. I could talk to you for another hour. The problem is I have so many notes, so I'm gonna have to drag you back another time in a couple months. I know you're incredibly busy otherwise. Let's talk about pay scale. One of the things that I've done with the job board is I've got all these roles and I'm seeing the pay. What if you're looking for, and this is maybe a loaded question because it does depend on experience and company size and stuff. But if you're looking for an experienced partner operations leader to come in and you're like, great, we're kind of established, and typically it's not an early hire. I'll say that too. It's a reactive hire because we got a project or something driving it. What are you seeing happening right now with pay scales in the industry? What would you be looking to hire
oh,
someone with maybe 5 years experience? What do you think that would look like or justify right now? I didn't prep you for this
comp is
question,
hard.
so this is
Yeah,
off the
I was like
cuff.
comp is
Tough.
hard, right? Like
Yeah.
I mean, I go into Pave and I like look at like what things are comped at and I'm just like I don't know, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm like I could look at my own comp and be like I'm grossly underpaid or I'm grossly overpaid. It kind of just
Yeah.
depends on which way the wind blows. So I think that it's hard, right? Because like some of this is what and again it's like you're gonna get kind of that band, and my guess is like I'm gonna give a like real wide band is like probably between like the 120 to like the 160 range
Yeah.
roughly. And that's a big band, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
$40,000 band. But I think it depends on like what you're doing in that organization and like how
Yeah.
you're doing it too, right? Like are you bringing somebody in with like a tremendous amount of experience who's going to like stand this up and knows what they're doing, or are you bringing somebody in to coach and grow and learn, and like what does the growth path look like for that person, right? Like if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
invest and like actually build out a team, as well. Like a lot of times on these RevOps organizations and teams, it's like you're your function, right? Like traditionally you don't have 10 people on your marketing operations team out of the gate, or you start to get there and you start
Yeah.
to build that, but like you will like operations will be the lagging team that builds, right? We're not usually the like start, right? We're the finish. You're building sales, you're growing,
Yeah.
capacity gets tight, then you're hiring, right? You're not saying let me build this great operational team before, you know, salesperson likes to tell me like without revenue there's not revenue ops, right? And like he's
Yep.
not wrong. They're
Yeah.
not wrong in saying that, right?
Yeah. 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 900%. I still would like to be there early and build it all for them, right? That's my
You
invariably my ops mindset.
yeah.
Like I still want to be there early and do this for you. Everywhere I've been, I've thought I wish you'd
If I
hired me
can set
six
you
months
up at the
ago.
start, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like if I
Yeah.
can help get stuff set up at the beginning, so much better for everybody. But like again, you got to look at like the cogs and like the investment that you're making from a business, and like sometimes that's not the right money to spend at that right time. And the person who unfortunately gets, I'm going to say, punished for it is that ops person that you hire who has to
Yeah.
come in and clean up the mess or like start building
Yeah.
really quickly.
Man, I could talk about this forever. I think one of the things you highlighted for me around pay is there's a location based thing too, right? Are you real quick? Are
Yeah.
you like, yeah, we should vary based on location, like same person, same skill set, different city should absolutely be paid more or less? Is that relevant? Is it something we can't avoid?
I mean, I just think you pay people what they're worth and like what their value is going to be, regardless of where they live. As somebody who's lived out in the Bay Area, lives in Des Moines, Iowa right now, like there's a very different probably cost of living
Mm-hmm.
statute there, but it's not to say that I work any like I don't work as hard or I'm not as valuable or I'm like my qualities aren't as strong as somebody in California, right? Like
Yeah.
it, at this point we're all remote. We can all generally pick where we want to live and how we want to live. It's like just
Yeah.
pay me what pay me what I'm worth, right?
Yeah, I think of the people like you and I that are not in the majors. I'm in Northwest Arkansas, right? And people that
Yeah.
Arkansas, super cheap cost of living. Not in Northwest Arkansas, not where Walmart is investing millions and millions of dollars to grow and they have salaries that inflate cost of living. Like, no, no, no. In this
Yeah.
area, it's not the Bay Area for sure, but it's not like the rest of Arkansas. I found that people who work remote are we're all very much going, just pay me what I'm worth. Because I'm
Yep.
seeing hybrid roles trickle back in. I'm seeing reduction in pay band. I'm seeing location-based variances start to come in more. And I think one is frustrating as a remote employee, but in for partner ops especially, I know lots of people that have been out of work and looking for work and getting work, but they're coming in at lower bands because of the whole flip of the industry and what it's done over the past couple of years as well. Okay, Mollie, we're gonna have to end it. We just have to stop because there's too many other things I want to talk to you
Fine.
about. Too many other things I want to say. Okay, listeners, I'm going to put if you're in the show notes thing, I'm going to put some links in the show note. I will include this link to her RevOps roadmap that she has here. That is a public link. You said, Mollie. I can share that. That's okay.
Yep, it's a public Google
Wonderful.
file. I
Um,
Yep.
so many lessons for people to branding here too. Like you came prepared. Here's this question. I've got this stuff. I'll put a link to a couple other interviews I think you've done that are just worth listening to, in my opinion, as well. I'll link out your profile. Anything we should end with? Any last like sign off or anything else you want to make sure partner ops people are aware of?
No, I think one of the big things as like a partner ops person, I say no, and then I'm adding commentary, and you're like, "Shut up, we got to end
No, no,
this." But like, just like,
my face that I just made. If you're watching videoly, it's because I just realized one of the questions that I want to get into that we're going to have to circle back to is great. If in partner ops, how do we work with RevOps? Like, how do we bring value to the
yeah,
table from the partnership perspective to make sure we get heard, we get bandwidth, we get capacity? You could help me with those, but we don't have time for that today. So your thought, go ahead.
yeah. No, the follow up here, right, is like really like if you're coming into the partner ops and like you're like looking for roles and those things, like push on what partner ops actually means. Like I do the same thing with rev ops when I'm interviewing, right? Like you
Yeah,
just think I'm sales ops, right? Partner ops, you just like what are you really expecting, and like really push on that, because I think that's a big indicator when you're interviewing for roles and when you're seeking roles, is like, do they actually know what they want, or is it jargon in the market that they're like, I think I need this thing. So like
yeah,
I mean, I'm a big believer of like challenge your interviewer, right? Like I love interviews where the person asks me questions the whole time and like challenges me to know what they're getting into. Like interviews are not one sided; they're two sided. So like
yeah.
really push on that, especially in this like ops space.
Yeah, I think it's that's a tough one. I think it's a mindset one where, and when you've been out a month for 10 months, it doesn't feel like a two-way process. You need that paycheck. But I love that idea because one of the other best pieces of advice I've ever gotten was from Mary View. Pretty sure you probably know Mary, right?
Yep. Oh yeah,
Over
love
at
love
Thinkery.
Mary.
Chatted with her early about some of this stuff a couple years ago, and she was like, "Make sure you got a job and not a project." And I was like, "Oh, that's such a
Hmm.
great call out," because partner ops is often driven by the need to do deal reg. We've already bought the PRM. We need someone to
Yep.
stand it up. Have you worked in this one before? Great, you're hired. 6 months later, they don't have a good plan. They don't know what to do, and you end up on the chopping block. Not going to say that's happened, but I know the story. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. We're knocking on 40 minutes, folks. I got to shut it down. This has already
Shut it down.
hopefully been valuable for my audience. I know it was valuable for me. Mollie, I always love talking to you. Thanks for coming, folks. Follow up on the episode. Follow, like, share, or don't. I don't care. Go to the website. Go to the show notes. Connect with us on LinkedIn. I'll have Mollie's LinkedIn bio up there as well. Follow her at the very least. She's constantly sourcing. I found other good people and other good ideas. So she's a good conduit for building community. Thanks for coming. As always, folks, good luck partnering.